So today we are going to be looking at how to use the TI-30XS multi-view calculator by Texas Instruments and how to use that calculator to help us with problems in the Pythagorean Theorem lesson in Study Island under geometry. So just as a quick review, the Pythagorean Theorem is a squared plus b squared equals c squared, where a and b are the legs of the right triangle and c is the hypotenuse of the right triangle. This can only be used with right triangles. If you need more of a review of that, feel free to look under my geometry playlist and look at the Pythagorean lesson there, and that will give you more of a review of the Pythagorean Theorem. And so today the problems we're going to look at, it isn't all of the problems in that lesson. However, it's a chunk of them that we can use the calculator to help us out if we are struggling. So in Pythagorean Theorem, I have a right triangle, and this problem tells me that the side P is 28 centimeters and the side R is 45 centimeters. And it wants to know what is the length of Q, the hypotenuse. And the hypotenuse is always across from the right angle. So I'm going to use Pythagorean Theorem to solve that. My lengths are that P and that R. So I'm going to have 28 squared plus 45 squared, and I'm looking for that c squared. So in these problems, I'm still going to have to write some down, but I can use the calculator to go through and do most of the work for me. So I'm going to have 28 squared plus 45 squared, and I press enter, and that's 2,809. And that's still equal to the c squared. To undo the square, I have to take the square root of both sides. So that's where I'm going to use the square root button on my calculator, which is this green above the x squared. Since it's in the green, I have to use my second button, so I'm going to press second square root, and I'm going to type in 2,809, and I press enter, and it gives me 53 as my answer. So I know right away that choice A is going to be my final answer. And if you can use this calculator, you don't necessarily have to have those big square root numbers memorized. Number 2, I'm given another right triangle, and this time I'm told n is 37 centimeters, and that's going to be my hypotenuse. And I'm told that the leg L is 12 centimeters, and it wants to know what is the length of my other leg M. So I'm going to be using Pythagorean Theorem again, only this time I'm going to be solving for a leg. So we'll say we'll solve for A. So I don't know A squared, so I'm going to write that down. And then I'm going to say that L is my B side, so that's 12 squared. It doesn't matter which of the legs is A and B, but the C number always has to be the hypotenuse, which here is 37. So I'm going to have 37 squared. This time, though, I'm solving for a leg. So I'm going to have to use the calculator to calculate that leg. And so I'm going to have to find out what 12 squared is, which was 144. I'm going to write that down. And I'm going to find out what 37 squared is, and that is 1369. And then I have to subtract that 144 from both sides. So I'm going to subtract that from 1369, and if I press the minus, it brings down that ANS, that stands for the answer, and so it's bringing down the last answer. So it's subtracting from 1,369 for me already, and that gets me the 1225 that A squared is going to be equal to. Now, if you had realized right off the bat that you were going to have to subtract the squares of the two of the hypotenuse and the leg, you could have typed in 37 squared minus 12 squared. And that will also give you that 1225. And then your last step is to take the square root of that 1225. So I'm going to press second square root, 1225, and I press enter, and that answer is 35. So 35 is going to be the length of my leg M, and choice C is going to be my final answer. Here's another Pythagorean Theorem problem. Here it's a word problem. It tells us in the tent pictured below, the vertical post X is perpendicular to the ground. So that's how we know it's a right triangle, is it's perpendicular. So this is a right angle. The post is 56 inches in length. So we know X is 56. The distance from the post to the edge of the tent, Y, is 72 inches. So right here is 72 inches. Approximately, what is the tent slant height, Z? So I want to know, what is this side? Well, I have a right triangle, and I know two of the sides, so I'm going to use Pythagorean Theorem to find the third side. So I know X and Y are the legs of my right triangle here, because they make that right angle. So I'm going to have 56 squared plus 72 squared equals that Z squared. So my first step is going to be to add those squareds together. So I have 56 squared plus 72 squared equals, that's going to equal 8,320. And then my last step is going to be to take the square root of that number, so 8,320. I press enter, and I get this decimal. And if I look, it said approximately. So approximately means that I'm going to round. And the number here that is closest to what's on my calculator is 91, so C is going to be my final answer. Now my fourth answer here is if two sides of a right triangle are the square root of 10 centimeters and the square root of 15 centimeters long, which of the following measurements could be the length of the third side? Well, here they don't tell me if this is going to be, if those lengths that they give me are legs or hypotenuses, so I'm going to have to try both ways. So I'm going to have to see if I take the square root of 10 squared plus the square root of 15 squared, what will that equal? So I could solve for the hypotenuse, or I might have to do, what if I'm missing a leg? So I could solve for b squared. And remember, your hypotenuse is always your biggest number, so the only number here that could be the hypotenuse is the square root of 15, because that one's bigger. So I'm just going to have to solve both of these problems. So first, I'm going to take the square root of 10 squared, and so I have my square root button here. I'm going to press second square root, press 10, and then I'm going to arrow out of that, and then square it, because I want that square to be outside of the square root, plus second square root 15, right arrow out, squared, and I press enter, and that gives me 25. So then I'm going to have to take the square root of that number to find out what C is, because right now 25 is what equals C squared. So I'm going to have to take the square root of both sides to find out what C is. So second square root 25 is 5. So I don't have any 5s listed here. So that means that these numbers aren't both legs. That means one's a leg and one's a hypotenuse. So I'm going to solve for that third side now. So remember, when you're solving for a leg, you can just take the hypotenuse squared minus the leg squared on your calculator, or you can work it out step by step like I showed you in number 2. Whichever way you can do it and get it 100% correct both times is the way to go. So I'm going to scroll out of this so that my squared's outside the square root, minus second square root 10, and I'm going to scroll out of that, squared, and press enter, and that gives me 5. So that means b squared here equals 5, and my last step is to take the square root of the number I got from the subtraction. So I'm going to take second square root 5, and I press enter, and that doesn't reduce at all. It stays the square root of 5, which is an answer that they give me. So choice D here is going to be my final answer. I hope that helps you out in your Pythagorean Theorem lesson in geometry. And I appreciate you listening today. Have a good day.